Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the WM32 Football Podcast. Once again, it is me and Nelson in the hot seats. And today we are reacting to the news. I'm pretty sure anybody involved in football would have seen it yesterday. If not, what were you doing? Because Frank Lampard has lost his job as Chelsea manager. So obviously, a couple of weeks ago, we went through perhaps what Frank was experiencing at the time, but now obviously he has lost his job, so it's going to be down to me and Nelson to kind of chew the fat and pick the meat off the bones in terms of what has happened at Chelsea and what happened to Frank Lampard, but also what's going to happen next with the imminent appointment of former Mainz, Borussia Dortmund, and Paris Saint-Germain manager Thomas Tuchel. So Nelson, as we said there, Frank has lost his job. His last game actually was a win in the FA Cup against Luton Town. So Nelson, was there anything there from that particular game or in recent weeks that made you feel like Frank losing his job was inevitable, or what did you think he'd get more time?
First and foremost, happy to be here. Obviously, like you said, we spoke about Frank a couple of weeks back. And I think at the end of the podcast, we both said that it's likely that he'll probably keep his job. But now we're looking at the fact that he's not there anymore.
Shows what we know.
The fact that, he's not there anymore, I think I'm a little bit disappointed. I still think he should have been given the time, especially on the back of what he did last season with the limited resources he had at the club and the transfer embargo as well that the Chelsea had to face. I wouldn't say there were a few pinpoint moments that you asked about if there were certain moments that maybe show that his job, it was inevitable for him to leave. I think you could argue the FA Cup final loss to Arsenal may have been a factor. As an Arsenal fan myself, I certainly headed into that game actually not fearing Chelsea as much as I would, even though they finished fourth and were at the back of getting the Champions League place. I was not very worried at all. We obviously ended up winning it, so you could argue that the fact that and it's crazy because Arteta and Lampard were both in their kind of first season. Arteta having half a season actually, both being inexperienced managers that they are, and one of them would have basically gotten a trophy within their first year of managing the club. So obviously Arteta landed out on top, but I would argue the FA Cup final loss was the reason. I think as well, which we might get onto later on today, is the transfer key that he had at his disposal. With 200 million, all that money to spend, I'm sure he wasn't allowed to spend. I'm sure him and his team did his recruitment and tried to find the right players, to suit his kind of projects. You look at Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Edouard Mendy, the most notable signings. And with that kind of money that you spend, the expectation with that kind of money is results. And, it's been something that we can't argue that, that's been Chelsea's culture at the club. I think since Abramovich has taken over, it's been results. And I think the average time that a coach spends there is roughly 3 years. Like even Mourinho, one of the most successful managers in history, I think didn't last more than 3 years at the club. So it's kind of, I wouldn't say worrying, but it's not surprising that he was sacked. When you look at the culture of the Chelsea club, but I would probably pinpoint the FA Cup final loss and the 200 million kind of the money that he had available in the transfer window. But what about yourself? That question you asked me. What do you think?
Well, I watched the FA Cup game against Luton on Sunday and felt that Luton were sort of in the game without really sort of doing a lot. You just felt that Chelsea perhaps should have looked to take the game to them a bit more. Yes, okay, that Chelsea are the Premier League side and they've got undoubted quality within the team and within the squad, but at the same time, I don't think that they sustained a period of real sort of pressure and sustained a lot of attacks towards Luton's goal. I always felt that Luton, like I say, was sort of in the game, and you just felt for Luton, if they perhaps held on or kept it 1-0, they might go down the other end and nick a goal, which they did, and Luton did make a bit of a game of it. I was actually speaking to one of my friends who's a Luton fan, and he was slightly disappointed with the way that Luton played. And it's like, okay, no disrespect to Luton, obviously they're a Championship club, and doing okay this season compared to where they were last season. But for a club the size of Chelsea, you wouldn't sort of anticipate a tricky home game in a cup tie against a team that's in a division below you, as well. So yeah, like I say, Chelsea wasn't overly convincing for me, but yeah, I think at the same time, I don't think Frank's sacking was sort of on the wall, or it was inevitable that he was going to get the sack. I know they'd been through a bit of a bad patch in the Premier League, obviously not that long ago, top of the Premier League, and they've just hit a bit of bad form. I think most teams in the league this season, especially the sort of renowned top six, have had bad runs this season. We've seen it earlier on in the season. Arsenal were down there 15th, best spell of the season for me. Being a Tottenham fan and seeing Arsenal down there, I was like, yeah, I was buzzing. City didn't start off that great. They're now starting to pick up a bit of form. Liverpool, it looks like are hitting a bit of a bad patch at the moment. Obviously, they've done well with their defensive injuries to sort of be where they are, really, Liverpool for me. And it's quite strange because at a similar time when Chelsea were top of the league and everybody was praising Frank Lampard, Ole was, on the warpath and he was going to lose his job. So it just shows how quickly in football things can turn around for you, because United are sitting pretty at the top of the league, where actually they were near Arsenal at one point and near sort of the bottom of the league. Tottenham have been indifferent, I think, throughout parts of the season. Obviously, yes, there was a time where Tottenham were top of the league, and I was buzzing, but we've kind of fell away a little bit. So I just think it was almost Chelsea's turn. But I think you made a good point there about the culture at Chelsea. They are very ruthless, and it is right. If you're not getting results, okay, we're going to give you some time to try and turn it around. But if we see that it's not working, we're getting rid. And I think Abramovich's statement yesterday was big, because it's the first time he's publicly come out and said anything regarding a manager being sacked. But also his comments within that statement about there being no clear sense of direction in order to turn this bad bit of form around. I looked at that and I was a bit, shocked, if anything, because it's like, okay, you don't, obviously clearly they didn't have faith in Frank to turn it around, but to say there's no sort of clear path or clear direction, I thought that wording was very, very strong, because usually you'd say, okay, we've just got rid because things weren't working out or anything like that. But like I say, to word it as no sort of clear path or direction to turn it around, I think was like I say, very, very strong. And considering we've still got half the season left, so there's still a lot of football to be played. All the big guns are going to be playing each other. Even in the next sort of 2 weeks, we've got some big games there. So teams are going to start dropping points, and it could be that Chelsea end up, I know they're sort of ninth at the minute, but they could end up back in the hunt for the top four. So yeah, but am I sort of surprised by the fact Chelsea have sacked a manager? No. Am I surprised potentially of who it that they've got rid of and who was in charge? Maybe, but I think that sentiment and that has gone. So yeah, it was like I say, it was actually quite funny, really, because it's a club legend and somebody that has given a lot of service to the football club, won many different things there, and yet kind of 18 months into his project, and his ideas, you want to pull rank and get rid. Like I say, it's probably because it's Chelsea that nobody's surprised. I think if it was majority of other clubs in the league, I think would be a lot more surprised. To be honest.
Yeah. Completely 100% agree with you. Not surprised about regarding the culture of the club. One thing that I wanted to talk about is...
Sorry, Nels, we missed you. You froze a little bit for a minute there, so I don't know if you just wanted to perhaps go over your point that you were making.
Yes, I was just saying that I completely 100% agree with what you said regarding, the way Chelsea kind of handled it, and especially that Abramovich statement that you mentioned. Like, we rarely hear him come out and actually talk to the media. So one of the things that got to me regarding that especially was maybe, that sentiment that you mentioned that, Frank has with the club. I guess as a part of Abramovich that actually cares to actually come out, and wish Frank the best as well. But again, a Chelsea fan, it makes you think, it makes you worry, like, what kind of direction are they actually heading into? Like, it makes you worry what kind of direction they're into, a clear sense of direction. That's another as well. So we'll have to wait and see, what Chelsea are gonna. We hear that the imminent arrival of Thomas Tuchel is coming pretty soon to join the club, but we're gonna have to wait and see. I think as a Chelsea fan, I'd be worried, like, what kind of direction are we going in for our owner to say there's no clear sense of direction? So as a rival fan, you'll probably be enjoy that Chelsea is struggling right now, but I imagine Chelsea fans right now are a bit kind of like thinking, how are we gonna move forward? What direction are you gonna go into? And another thing I was gonna ask is, they had the £200 million available to spend, and they bought the likes of Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Eduardo. So I wanted to ask you first, in regards to recruitment. What do you think? How do you think Chelsea recruitment's been in terms of the people that they bought over the summer? Do you think it was the right players to suit Frank's style, or do you think they just thought, okay, we have the money, let's just show off that we can spend that much money?
I just want to kind of pick up on one of your points where you said about as a fan, what direction now are the club going into? I think when Frank came in, obviously we know the transfer ban and whatnot, but it seemed that Frank had a clear philosophy, and that was to bring through younger players. Now, okay, first year he probably had to do it because his hands were tied, but I think yes, he spent 200 million, but by and large, he still stuck with a lot of those players that he embedded into the Chelsea team last season. Reece James has almost cemented himself now as the number one right back for Chelsea, and has broken into the England squad off the back of that. Mason Mount is an England player as well. Again, looks like a fixture in the England team and the England squads. Whatever we make of that. I know I called him overrated a couple of weeks ago, but you still have to, credit where it's due. Frank's got him, into the England side. Tammy Abraham is, seems like Chelsea's number one centre forward in terms of the fact that he plays more often than not. All right, his goal return perhaps isn't the greatest, but Frank has backed him along the way. Billy Gilmore's come in and looked tidy. Is probably the best way I can describe it. So yeah, and I think he's given a couple of other younger players some minutes and some debuts as well. So it seemed like there was that clear plan and there was that clear philosophy there from Lampard. Yes, okay, if we can't bring a player through for that position, right, we may have to go and buy one. But back on to recruitment. The short answer is that Chelsea play Football Manager and FIFA in the summer. So they had all this money and went, here we go. Let's have a bit of a spend up. It was almost as if Lampard had worked with his recruitment team and those at the board to identify players for positions that he wanted. watching Marcus Alonso, I wouldn't trust him as a left back, which is quite annoying because he often scores against Tottenham as well, which is really, really annoying as well, like really annoying. So it's like Frank needed a left back, obviously went and bought Ben Chilwell. Potentially needed a centre half or two, and Frank ended up with two on a free, and Thiago Silva, and Malang Sarr, who ended up going out on loan to Porto. And any Football Manager players out there know how good Malang Sarr is. So it's one of those. If you know about Malang Sarr, you know about Malang Sarr.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost as if that, like I say, Frank wanted certain players, or he pinpointed certain positions. He wanted a striker to perhaps provide competition for Abraham and Giroud. Got Timo Werner. Perhaps needed some players that could play out wide. Got Ziyech, because obviously he'd lost Pedro and Willian. So he's brought in Ziyech, and people like that. It's almost as if, he's identified all these positions that he needs and he's got them all. So now he's thinking, oh snap, like, I've got them all at once. Usually you might look at it and go, well, we might need another winger, but not yet. So it might have been, say, this window or next summer, they might have brought a winger in, or they might have brought in a centre forward next year, or they might have brought in a centre half next year, or something like that, in terms of your planning. But I think I said a couple of weeks ago as well, it's almost like I'm looking at it, for me, I think half of Chelsea's business would have probably been done last year, but for the transfer ban. So obviously they've been able to sort of shortlist and identify players with the hope that they will get them in the summer, in this January transfer window that we're in now, and then next summer, and sort of plan ahead. But like, it sort of almost feels like they've got every single one of the positions that they've pinpointed, they've got every single one. So then all of a sudden it's like, okay, the outlay 200 odd million, and yeah, I just think with that, he's then struggled to try and fit all the players in to a way of playing that suits everybody. And listen, I know Frank's not going to be one to, he's going to upset people along the way. That's the nature of the beast and the nature of the job. But it's almost like he's tried to appease too many at one time. And instead of perhaps, I know he's had a bit of a sticky time sort of this season. Obviously, he's lost his job, but sort of at the start of the season, he had players that he'd bought in that were injured. So they couldn't come in and get to grips with how they wanted to work. Obviously, short on pre-season, again, that has an effect. But let's not forget, Chelsea went on a, I think, 16-game unbeaten run at this season. So who's getting credit for that then right now, because Frank's lost his job? Was it Frank at the time? Was it the players? It seems like now it's almost like, well, it's the players, because I know you can't chop a squad of players, but the manager's got the chop. So yeah, I think recruitment wise, it, like I say, looks like they've played Football Manager or FIFA. But like I say, at the same time, it's like they've identified all these positions, like a goalkeeper. They brought in Edouard Mendy. I think I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. He's probably one of the most overrated goalkeepers in the league. He still doesn't convince me. But somebody somewhere is convinced, or was convinced by him in his performances, and then has convinced Frank, Jody Morris, and then the people above to sign him. So yeah, I think that's sort of where I see the recruitment side of things, from Frank Lampard's sort of tenure, or certainly this season anyway. I know, like last season, he brought in Kovacic and made that a permanent, but then Kovacic has been very in and out of the team. Jorginho's been in and out of the team. Kante doesn't look the same player anymore, and I think that's probably why Lampard wanted Declan Rice. But then I think, or what's emerged since Lampard's sacking, is that actually Lampard really, really wanted Declan Rice, and those above said no, because obviously Declan Rice, as we know, was once upon a time at Chelsea. So they kind of looking at it as, well, we'll have massive egg on our face if we bring somebody back that we've let go. But Lampard seemed convinced to have him in there. But what I did like about Frank as well was that there did seem to be a little bit, or started to develop a bit of an English or British kind of core within the side. Like I say, Tammy Abraham, Hudson-Odoi was there, Mason Mount, Reece James, Chilwell, Tomori, who's just gone out on loan to AC Milan, which for me was a massive surprise. So they're, Gilmore, I don't know if I mentioned him, but yeah, there seemed to be that just starting to get perhaps that British core, and obviously Declan Rice would have added to that. So yeah, I don't know what you think recruitment wise for Chelsea. So I'd be keen to get your thoughts on that. Oh no! Sorry, Nels, you froze again. So I was just saying about the recruitment, and was keen to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, sorry, you were saying, Wes. I apologise for a little breakdown.
No, it was just obviously I just went into a little bit of detail regarding Chelsea's recruitment, and I was kind of keen to get your thoughts on their recruitment and what they've done.
Yeah, I think to have that money at his disposal, I actually think he did well, because you mentioned the free transfers, especially of Malang Sarr, which I was actually surprised when they sent him back out on loan. I thought he'd be given the opportunity to actually prove himself. And I think then again, you give credit to Kurt Zouma, who's actually scored more goals, I think, than Aubameyang this season, and Thiago Silva's come in, and obviously, like you said, they went on that 16-game run. So you kind of look at the whole team and think, okay, he's made good business in actually giving Sarr maybe more time out on loan and keeping with Thiago Silva and and Kurt Zouma. But then you look at obviously the likes of Rudiger, who may be, who's probably potentially transfer listed to move on maybe in this window or next summer, and you think, oh, was it the right move to kind of bring Malang Sarr out on loan? But I think he did well with I think with what he was given to spend. I think he actually did well. The only thing that's been troubling me, obviously, since he's got the sack, is it his fault that you mentioned? Like, do these players fit into, like, has he got the best out of his players in his system, or is it the fact that us, or not even us, but the players needed time to adjust to his whole philosophy, his whole kind of way he wants to play, his whole project? I think there are some signings that I think, regardless of the manager, whoever is in charge, I think they will be mainstays. You look at Ben Chilwell, I think he's going to be a mainstay in Chelsea side. I think Edouard Mendy, as much as he doesn't convince you, I think he's actually going to be a mainstay in the side. Timo Werner, the quality that he has, there's no way that you'd be looking to ship him out, and in his very first season. I think just bide him some time, and I think he'll come good. Kai Havertz is a 50-50 for me. He's a 50-50 just because I think he's 20, 21. And again, like, age is on his side to improve. But at the end of the day, I think you pay that much money for him, and like, obviously, like, again, we talked about the culture at Chelsea, expect these results. So I'm afraid, I'm worried about him in terms of, his performance is 50-50. I think the one I hated moving to Chelsea the most was Hakim Ziyech. We know how Ziyech was at Ajax, and Ziyech was an absolute killer. Oh my gosh, that run that Ajax went in, which obviously you guys ended in the Champions League semi-final, that Ajax squad had a whole load of talent, and Ziyech was the one that stood out. And I think his numbers across that season were ridiculous. Like, we're talking 20 plus goals, and I think potentially 20 plus assists. So they brought in a real creative force in Ziyech. And I think when he played in that Chelsea squad, and had a lot of injury this season, I think that was one player that I think Frank, I wouldn't say relied on the most, but you could tell that Frank got the best out of him in terms of the new signings. Because I think his whipped crosses, his kind of, thread of a needle pass, he was able to pick those out. And I think that's Chelsea's best signing so far. But I think, like you said, I think he received everything, I think, too quickly. Everything just came at once. And in that sense, I think it was hard to kind of manage all of them and put them in at the same time. It's almost as if like you're in FIFA Ultimate Team, you just put in all the best players, but they don't end up having like the right chemistry. Like there's no chemistry between them. So I think that's been a case that Frank Lampard has seen, like you said, they've gone and done a FIFA shop pretty much. But we'll have to wait and see, with Thomas Tuchel potentially coming in, see what he does with this whole squad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite interesting actually. And your point on Havertz again was a real interesting one. I personally think that he probably hasn't played in a role that was similar that got that productivity out at Leverkusen. I think sometimes he's been hoisted out on a wing or whatnot, and I think Havertz actually done his best work in that number 10 role. But the thing is, it's like, do I play Havertz? Do I play Mason Mount? Do I play somebody else? And I think as well, I know these sort of players were getting older, but so you've lost that experience. But Pedro had quite a bit of pace out wide, and Willian was pretty quick. He was probably not now, Nelson, as you know, being an Arsenal fan, but he was pretty quick, at one point. So I think perhaps Chelsea might have lost that little bit of pace in the wider areas. I know Ziyech is more of a player that would come inside and drift inside. And you had Pulisic, who's been, I think, brilliant for Frank Lampard, or was brilliant for Frank Lampard. He was sort of the only one that really had that pace. I think Hudson-Odoi didn't particularly get too many chances to play. So I think Havertz kind of filled a role and filled a gap, in between different positions. So it'll be interesting to see now, as you said, with the imminent arrival of Tuchel, where some of these players will end up playing. And speaking of Tuchel, then Nelson, what do you think he's going to bring, not only to the Premier League but to Chelsea as well?
I think he's obviously going to bring his style to, his own personal style to the league, because I really enjoyed seeing him, especially at his time. I didn't really follow much of his time at PSG simply because we expect the results that PSG have got in terms of finishing on top of the league in Liga in France and winning pretty much every domestic trophy that's available there in France. But I think it was his time at Dortmund that really, I really paid attention to, because obviously he took over from Klopp, pretty unknown to the masses out there, and ended up, I think he won the cup. I think he won the cup with them before he departed. I think Aubameyang was actually in that squad as well before he departed. So I think he brought a nice sense of style, and I think he kept that tradition of, Dortmund's strategy of buying the hottest or buying, young prospects and actually building them up and developing them. You had the likes, I think, of Pulisic, who played under him. So I think Pulisic is someone that may thrive under Thomas Tuchel. I think Thomas would know how to get the best out of him. I think at the time at Dortmund, he had Ousmane Dembele as well, who was who actually got ridiculous numbers that season and ended up getting a permanent move to Barcelona. I think they'll bring obviously with his preferred formation of 4-3-3 attacking, I think you're going to see a much more attacking Chelsea with, the kind of formation that he sets out. I'm interested to see, I think the one thing I'm interested to see is, we know he won't struggle in terms of language, with him learning English and stuff. I think he'll settle right in. I think it's just how he will adjust to the style of the Premier League. I think the Premier League, when you enter any new manager, I think it's a whole different beast compared to French Ligue 1, which isn't as fast-paced as we are. You've got Germany, which are a bit more technical, and you've got us, which are sort of physical. I think the Premier League has a bit of everything, whereas, certain leagues miss certain, kind of qualities. So I think that's the interesting thing to see, how he would adjust to the whole fast-paced, Premier League. the fact that we lack a winter break. We've had, obviously the other leagues have a winter break, but the fixture list is piling up pretty much for the league right now. So I think we're going to see a much more attacking Chelsea. Personally, I think with the formation that he likes to set out, and I think we're going to have to wait and see how well he does, just because at the end of the day we don't know. Chelsea currently sit ninth, I believe. They sit ninth. And we'll have to see what he'll have to turn around. I think he will turn things around. I personally think he will turn things around for the club. Will they win a trophy at his time there? I do not know. I think that's another question itself. But I think he will turn things around. And I think we're going to see a much more attacking Chelsea. But what are your opinions on Thomas Tuchel's imminent arrival?
I think Tuchel coming in, it was almost... Listen, it was a shock that Frank got the sack in the first place, but it's almost like Chelsea's hierarchy had sort of built up to this moment. It seems that, it's a case of just dotting the I's and crossing the T's for him to be sort of announced at this stage. Interesting to see that it's a German manager coming in, because there could have been Allegri, it could have been, somebody else that perhaps isn't a German coach or a German manager, because Chelsea's sort of two most high-profile signings were German, in Werner and Havertz. I would like to think that Tuchel will know those players. As you said, will know Pulisic. Will also know Thiago Silva as well from their time at PSG. I actually think his time at PSG, he did brilliantly with them. I think because, okay, anybody can say, well, you've got unlimited money, you can literally go and sign who you want. But I think he did quite well in terms of managing those expectations, not only of those above him, but of the players themselves. I think he did well to manage the big egos in his time there. And, getting them to the Champions League final was, the furthest that PSG have ever got in that competition. And it was just, I think on the day they just got beaten by the better team, which sometimes you have to sort of hold your hands up and admit. So yeah, I think Tuchel, from sort of my understanding, is that he is very, very close to his players. He likes to get to know them personally, and will, I think, try and use that in his favour when obviously going in there. I think he's not got a lot of time really to get his ideas across, and I think that side of things will take a little bit of time, because there's a relentless sort of fixture schedule in the next up and coming months and weeks, in the sense that I think there's midweek fixture program this week, then mid-weekend games, and then another round of midweek fixtures, and stuff like that. So obviously every coach, every manager wants time on the grass and stuff with the players, so he's got to get in quick, and I wouldn't say stamp his authority, but almost get across his ideas pretty soon. I'm kind of excited because actually he's a manager and a coach that I do quite like. He was one that I would have liked to have seen at Tottenham once upon a time. I think it was around the time perhaps that Pochettino there was rumours that he might have been going to either Real Madrid or Man United, and people used to say to me, like, whereas if Poch went, who would you want? And I often used to say Thomas Tuchel. He's a coach that I like. He seems very tactical, very methodical in the way that he does things. As you said, I don't think the language will be any issue. I think he speaks good English. So yeah, it's a case of wait and see what happens in terms of his playing style, because I think he may adapt it slightly with the players at his disposal at the minute. And then I think he's got an 18-month contract at Chelsea, but then it's got an extension for another year, so it could be 2.5 years. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I think this season for Tuchel, it's just a case of almost getting your feet under the table, and then trying to reduce the deficit that's there already. And I don't think Chelsea. I know they're not too far away from top of the league, but I don't potentially see them winning the league this year. I mean, who knows? It's football; anything can happen. But it might just be that he targets, say, the FA Cup, and goes for that. Gets Chelsea into a decent spot in the Champions League as well. But yeah, I think as a Chelsea fan, looking at it, obviously, yes, you're gutted, upset that a club legend, was sort of halfway through his contract at the club and has been sacked. But actually, you're getting somebody who is still fairly young in his managerial career, but has a lot of experience. He's been at Mainz, he's been at Dortmund, been at PSG, but he knows how to win. And I think it's one thing knowing how to win as a player, because Frank ultimately did that. He won near enough everything at club level that there was for him to win. But I think as a manager, it's completely different. As a player, you're the one that's getting psyched up by somebody else, whereas as a coach, you're the one that's got to do it. So like I say, there's that difference there. But like I say, I think because he knows how to win and almost get over the line, I think it's a fairly shrewd appointment from Chelsea, because like I say, he's a very good coach, very good manager, and I think he will look to get the best out of Werner, especially, who's been on a barren run. Missed the penalty against Luton, and has missed some really, really big chances in games. So yeah, but I think as well, Frank almost didn't know again where to play Timo Werner. Does he play him out on the left with him cutting in? Does he play him through the middle? But I think playing Werner through the middle, he liked to play on the shoulder and almost drift out wide. And I definitely saw that when he was at Leipzig. But Werner played in a front two at Leipzig. He's now playing up top on his own.
He did.
So I think with the fact that he was able, because he was drifting, it was like, okay, I can do that because actually we've got another centre forward, say, in the box. We've got that presence in the box. So I don't know if that's what made Frank almost play him out wide, or the fact that he was a bit short on wingers and just needed somebody to kind of do a shift and do a job. But yeah, like I say, I think with Tuchel, again, he may even go to a little bit more of a 4-2-2-2, and try and perhaps get Werner alongside Abraham, see how that works, or Giroud, and almost go back to sort of two wingers, maybe Hudson-Odoi, Pulisic, and then it could be Kante and a other, say, in that central midfield role. But no, it'll be interesting to see what Tuchel does with the players at his disposal. And I don't know, obviously, if he'll bring anybody in. Obviously, he's only got a few days left of the transfer window, so it'll probably be a case of working with what he's got. But it'll be interesting to see how he gets across his ideas, for sure.
Great. In terms of, you mentioned about dealing with the players at disposal, I think a question that just popped into my head that I wanted to ask you is, if you could identify three players, which three players would you identify would benefit from his arrival, and maybe three players that actually may not benefit? So you're looking at both sides here. I think I'll put you on the spot there. But
yeah,
just
definitely. I think, obviously we're speculating at this stage. I think Werner will definitely benefit. And I think because as we've seen, right, the Premier League is a league that's completely different from any league in the world, in the sense that, West Brom, who are fighting for their lives, go and nick a point at Anfield and at the Etihad. Very rarely in other leagues would you see a team that's fighting relegation go and nick a point at one of the top teams. So I think Werner will benefit because of it's evident that he's taking a little bit of time to settle in. Now, if you've got somebody there who can speak the same language as you, now I know football in itself is like a universal language, but just the little bits off the pitch or, you know, in training, where, you know, you could have like little chats with players and be like, right, okay, this is what I want you to do. Da, da, da. But obviously Tuchel can do that in German, so Werner will feel a little bit more comfortable, I think, with that. Be interesting as well to see who defensively perhaps will shine. You know, I know Rudiger's just got back into the side, but now is he going to be a player that then gets, you know, more game time and establish a partnership, say with Thiago Silva, who seems to be the number one centre back at Chelsea. So Rudiger might benefit. I think as well maybe Jorginho could benefit. I emphasize the word could in there.
Could, okay.
Because it's almost that Jorginho Verratti. They're very similar types of players. I just think that perhaps Verratti has a bit more of an engine on him. We've seen in the past Jorginho struggled to get around the pitch. So it might be that actually Jorginho benefits because he can say to Tuchel, can perhaps say to Jorginho, look, this is the sort of role that I see you playing for me and within the team and within the setup. I don't know if Jorginho is injured currently because he hasn't featured for what seems a short while at Chelsea. So yeah, I think Jorginho could be one that benefits as well. In terms of players who may not benefit, Tammy Abraham, perhaps. Obviously, it depends on the way Tuchel goes. Does he play with the one through the middle and the two wingers, as you suggested, or does he go with more of a front two? But I think Abraham may not benefit because I don't kind of, if I could pinpoint Abraham as a particular type of striker, like I don't think he's a target man. I don't think he's a poacher or fox in the box. So he may not benefit and I think as well with Giroud, you know, as I mentioned a few weeks back, probably the most underrated player in the Premier League. It might work in the sense that Giroud is that target man, and then Werner can look to play off of him. You know, and almost because I think at Leipzig it was Patrick Schick up top with Timo Werner or Yusuf Poulsen. Another sort of target man. So yeah, Abraham may not benefit. Again, I know you mentioned about the quality of Hakim Ziyech, but if I look at Tuchel, especially at Dortmund and at PSG, he sort of had the pace in the wide areas. And as I mentioned, I don't think Ziyech kind of brings that pace. So he may opt to go with, say, Hudson-Odoi or Pulisic out wide. If that's the case, then Ziyech may not get too much of a looking out in those positions. So Ziyech may find himself a little bit out of the side as well. And then maybe, you know, it's time for Christensen. Perhaps I don't think he'll benefit too much. I know he didn't really play too much this season anyway, which was a bit of a strange one, considering that he sort of broke into the Chelsea team under Sarri mainly. Played a little bit last season, hasn't featured too much this. So yeah, we'll definitely see, but I definitely sort of see those 6 or however many players I mentioned kind of benefiting or actually not benefiting from Tuchel coming in. I don't know if you had anything to add on the back of that, or any other players, any different players.
I think you've touched on. I think you didn't mention Kai Havertz. I think Kai Havertz is another person that may benefit from his arrival, like you said, in similarity to Timo Werner, the fact that they're both German. I think the whole German core at Chelsea will probably benefit from Thomas coming in. But I think especially for Kai Havertz, I think Thomas sitting down with him and saying, okay, we haven't got the best out, you know, you've struggled first half of the season. And then I think that kind of relatability, the fact that he's German, I think will kind of settle both Timo and Kai down. I think we may see the best of Kai Havertz the second half of the season. Another player that I think will benefit is Christian Pulisic. I personally am in love with Christian Pulisic as a player. He's an extraordinary player. I think for people, I think he was obviously injured this first half of the season when he came, and then he then had that hat trick at Burnley, which we never expected. and then just sort of kicked on from there slowly. I think when Project Restart happened, he was absolutely phenomenal. I think he was hitting a purple patch where I think he was just scoring pretty much every game, and it was the range of goals that he was scoring. There was kind of poachers goals with headers. Then he could hit one of his weak foot. I think he did one against Crystal Palace, just went boom, top bins, and it was just I think obviously at his time at Dortmund, Pulisic actually broke through the squad, and it was Thomas who was in charge. So I think that's another player that I think will benefit. In terms of the people who wouldn't benefit, I think you've pretty much covered everything. I think except for Reece James, I think, and Ben Chilwell, I'm worried about the rest of the English core. I think you mentioned one of the benefits of actually Frank Lampard being there is the young English core that he was building. It seemed that was happening at the club. And you look at Mason Mount, if he doesn't get a shoe in, then that might go to Kai Havertz. I think you mentioned about the fact that, he will probably play with fast wingers. So Hudson-Odoi may benefit from his arrival, but I'm worried about the rest of the young English core and even the academy, because I think Frank, with his limited resources, like you said, he had to turn to youth, but he was able to identify some of the youth, like you mentioned, Billy Gilmore. So you look at, young players, they see the arrival of Thomas Tuchel and they think, can I actually now break through the squad with that kind of manager in charge? Or, was it actually better when Frank was in? Because Frank would actually look at us and see that, So I would say a group of young players at the Chelsea academy, as well as, ones trying to break into the first team. I kind of worry for them as well. Because I think, obviously, you look at the likes of other clubs. You mentioned Chelsea have a great academy, but it seems that, they keep shipping out all these, talented young players on loan. I think Lucas Piazon had an interview recently talking about his time at Chelsea and how he struggled and how, there was a lot of talented crop of players, but they just, even though he trained pre-season before the season would start, he had an idea that he wouldn't actually break through into the first team. There was no kind of trust or kind of like belief that, he could actually make a difference. So it's a sad thing, but I think that those are sort of the things I would add to what you mentioned regarding the players. Yeah,
I think as well, Nels, just to pick up on your point about those academy players coming through, I think what also helped Frank Lampard was Jody Morris, because Jody Morris was a youth team coach at Chelsea. So if there was perhaps a player that was impressing, and the guys at the academy were saying to Frank, you've got to take a look at this particular player. And then he can almost turn to Jody Morris and go, Jody, what is this player actually like? And because Jody would sort of know about them, he can sort of say that, yes, they're ready, or just we'll monitor this particular player over a period of time before we say yes. So I think that was another thing that that helped Frank Lampard in his time at Chelsea. And also as well is you've got, I personally think you had a nice balance between the two, because Frank literally achieved, like I say, pretty much everything as a player, played in big tournaments, won the Champions League and things like that. But you also had Jody Morris, who had the ability to have a decent career, but it didn't quite go to plan. So it's almost that when they are giving these instructions, obviously, yes, you want to listen to Frank Lampard, he's the manager and things like that, but also with Morris giving his own ideas and opinions, you can sort of say, well, if somebody was to kick up a little bit of a fuss, he can turn around and say, well, if you don't do this, you'll end up like me, for example, or you'll end up like, other players he can use as an example, and then you won't end up being the player that you want to be. So I think that particular balance there was really, really nice at Chelsea at that particular time with Frank being there. So yeah, just a final one from me, Nelson. What do you see Chelsea achieving now for the rest of the season, as we've mentioned, with the imminent arrival of the German Thomas Tuchel?
In the words of Roy Keane, I think they will have enough. They'll do enough to stay up. There's nothing wrong for them to worry about. They'll do enough. They have enough to stay up. In the words of Roy Keane, I think they have enough to stay up. But to see, because I think they're 5 points off the top four. So it will be interesting to see whether Thomas can get a run of form going with this Chelsea squad and actually break into that top four, because it would be obviously bad for them to qualify under Frank and for Thomas to not actually qualify for the Champions League. And it makes you think, was that actually the right appointment to make if Thomas can't even get them into the Champions League, especially the fact that we know that Frank, like you said, no money whatsoever to spend and had to work pretty much the youngsters. So I think they'll finish in the top six. I actually think they'll finish outside the top four. I think they'll finish fifth. In terms of FA Cup run, I think they'll get as far as the quarterfinals. I don't think they will. I think for Thomas, I think for me is if it's your first time in the Premier League, I think we all know how difficult the league is, but you've got an opportunity to make a good cup run. So I think he should target that to try and bring a trophy and convince someone like Roman Abramovich that I'm the guy to stick with. But I don't think they'll make it that far. We mentioned, I think, who are they facing in the Champions League round of 16? Who have they got drawn? I'm trying to think. I can't really pinpoint.
I'm gonna be honest and say I'm not 100% sure who Chelsea have got in the last 16 in the Champions League. So I do apologise.
No, it's okay. I think I'm just trying to think, because Frank did really well to get them to finish top of the group. I think they only lost one game, or I'm not sure how many they lost that game, but they had a good Champions League group. They finished top, and obviously when you finish top, you end up getting kind of the lower, team that finished second. But I actually think they've got a tough tie. I can't remember. I do believe they have a tough tie. We'll have to check. I have to check when this is all over.
If any Chelsea fans want to let us know, then please do let us know.
Yes. But I don't think they'll get far in the Champions League. We all know he did well with PSG, but obviously you look at the quality that PSG had. They've got two superstars in Neymar and Mbappe, and then no offense to no disrespect to the rest of the Chelsea squad. There's a lot more that I just don't think he'll get them that far. I think obviously they're out of the Carabao Cup, so I think they're going to finish in the top six. They'll finish fifth, in my opinion, but I don't think they will win. He won't win any domestic trophies whilst he's there, FA Cup, or I don't think they'll get far in the Champions League. So that's my prediction for Thomas Tuchel's time in charge. What about you, Wes? What do you think? Where do you think they'll finish? Where do you think?
I think that they will finish fifth. I agree with you on that. I think they'll finish fifth in the league. This is just a real hard one, because it's like, that Chelsea are capable of going on a bit of a run. Especially when sort of things are against them, they sometimes pull out performances out of absolutely nowhere. I think we've seen that a few times over the years. But I think they'll finish fifth in the league. I think they will get to the quarters of the Champions League, and I think they'll get to the semis of the FA Cup. That's just what I think. But completely agree in terms of the fact they're not too far off of the top four, and actually I don't think they're a million miles away from the title race. But I think Chelsea's problem's been inconsistency. So I think perhaps Tuchel coming in just want to find a bit of consistency in one way or another. Agree with you. Perhaps they might try and target a cup. So I think maybe obviously it's draw dependent, but I think they may just sort of come unstuck in the latter stages of those sorts of tournaments. As you said there, with the superstars that he had at PSG, no disrespect to Chelsea, they're just on another level really. Were PSG. So I don't see them winning the Champions League. I think there's a lot more teams that are probably better placed and better suited to win the Champions League. So like I say, I think quarterfinals for them, and semi-final for the FA Cup, and then they may sort of just lose out. But I think they'll be in a position next season to challenge again if Tuchel gets the tools to do it, because we may find that actually if he doesn't win anything, then he might be out the door, and we might be having a similar situation, say in 6 months' time. Definitely we will have to see for sure. But guys, that is it for us and for today. We apologise for any technical issues that we had during the episode. Nelson, next week, make sure you put 50p in the meter for your Wi-Fi to work. That would help. Obviously, this year this is on YouTube, so make sure you like, comment your thoughts on anything that me and Nelson have said. Make sure you subscribe as well. Hit that notification bell so you know every time that we post. And also follow us on Spotify and social media for more content. At WM32 Football for those, and also the online shop is now live and direct. So as it's payday week, make sure you treat yourself to a bit of WM32 Football merchandise. All it leaves me to say is, Nelson, thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you soon. So take care and stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.